This is going to be a webinar from the Beam Exchange about greening the market systems development approach. This space, the Grab the Mic space, is there for you as a practitioner or your organization to talk about your experience, your lessons, your insights. So if you've got your own ideas about a webinar in future, do get in touch with us and propose your, if you want to grab the mic yourself. But today we've got Isaac Cowan-Gore, who's a technical officer in the SME unit at ILO. And he's been supporting the development and application of the MSD approach and other value chain development tools in ILO for a while now. And he's particularly interested in the nexus, if you like, between MSD and the environment. And then we've got Sara Pauli, who's an environmental scientist. She's been working for several years at Swiss Contact, and she implemented a number of different projects, but the one she's going to be talking about today is called Markets for Recycling, and it's a program in Bolivia. And then we're going to have Gramos Osmani, who's an intervention manager for the agribusiness project called RisiAlbania in Albania, as you might expect. And that's a program being implemented by Helvetas Swiss Intercooperation, or Helvetas as everyone knows it. And then after those three speakers have given their piece, we are going to hear a little bit from Clara Garcia Parra, who is now an independent consultant. She's going to give us some sort of reflections on what we've heard. Okay, now this is how it's going to work. We've got these 3 or 4 speakers, if you count Clara, and they're going to speak for, I hope, about half an hour, maybe a little bit over. And then we'll go to Q&A. So we've had a few questions in advance from those of you who registered, so thanks for those. But I want to invite you to put your own questions into the Q&A box. So if you're familiar with Zoom, it's not the chat box, it's the Q&A box, which is another dialogue box. And if you put your questions there, then I can moderate them more easily. If you've got any technical issues or you just want to say hello to people, please do use the chat box. But if you've got a question you want me to place to the speakers after they've spoken, then the Q&A is where to go. Great. I think we're ready to begin then. We've got, oh, look at that. We've got 50 people now in the room. That's great. So let me, with no further ado, hand over to Isaac, who's going to begin the presentations. Isaac.
So hi everyone. Really happy you're on board for this exciting webinar. I guess Mike already introduced a bit the structure of the agenda today, but yeah, so it's clear. First, I'll give a bit of an introduction on the relationship between economic development, environment, and MSD to set the stage. And then we'll hear from the 2 projects that Mike mentioned. So from RisiAlbania, which worked on medicinal and aromatic plants, and Markets for Recycling, which was formerly it's a follow-up of the Ecovest project, which worked on waste value chains. And so once they've given their project experiences, I'll take the floor again to try and kind of wrap it all up in overarching lessons for projects that want to achieve environmental objectives while using MSD. And then we'll move on to the discussion and Q&A. So why are we talking about this? Well, what does MSD have to do with the environment? Well, obviously value chains don't operate in vacuums. They operate in a wider natural environment that supplies these natural resources and other ecosystem services, such as pollination or stable temperatures. So you really can't have agriculture without bees, water, or various minerals that are essential for plant health. And in this sense, it's really clear that the state of the natural environment bears a direct impact on economic development. And here, I think a really telling statistic of this dependency is that this is estimated by the ILO that about 40% of employment worldwide depends on ecosystem services. And so the impact of degrading the environment has, in many cases, very real impacts on jobs and livelihoods. And this is something we're already seeing on a massive scale in sub-Saharan Africa, where because of climate change, extreme drought is becoming more and more prevalent, which is jeopardizing the livelihoods of millions of farmers, which had traditionally relied on rain-fed agriculture. but on the flip side, on a positive note, there are technologies and we have the knowledge to advance environmental sustainability and resilience in our economic systems. And so this is not just good for the environment, it also has the potential to create millions of additional jobs and safeguard livelihoods and also safeguard against other adverse effects on socioeconomic development. It can preserve water resources, you can have clean air, so you preserve human health and all these other adverse environmental impacts. So where does MSD come in? Well, why is this relevant to the beam and to all this MSD community? MSD projects have this strong potential to promote adoption of innovations in the private sector. And they can do this, they can channel this potential towards achieving environmental objectives. But there are different environmental objectives that they can achieve. And so I think, the first big one is that they can promote growth in green sectors, such as renewable energy or waste management or other sectors like that, which have a net positive impact on the environment. And I stress the kind of net positive impact because these also have potentially negative environmental impacts. So for example, for sourcing of valuable minerals to make solar panels, that can be very harmful. And so this brings me to my second point, the second possibility that MSD can support. It can support greening or improving the environmental sustainability of sectors. So for example, by improving resource efficiency or kind of promoting sustainable sourcing of raw materials. And lastly, on the other side, rather than supporting greening of economic activity and green growth, MSD projects can also support increased resilience to climate change. So they can help market actors adapt to these environmental pressures, which they don't really have control over. But what you see in practice is that despite this potential, few MSD projects actually integrate environmental concerns. And I think this is really attributable to various challenges and misconceptions on how projects can do this. And so now we're going to hear from the two projects that have actually done this to kind of show this is possible and how they did it. And so I hand over to Sara. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac, and I'm happy to be here. I will also share my screen. Which you should be seeing right now. So in my case, and as was mentioned in the introduction, I'm going to present some insights in this application of the MSD approach, specifically in two recycling projects we have implemented here in Bolivia as Swiss Contact, but mainly focusing on this one called Markets for Recycling. So I'm briefly going to present some challenges and opportunities as we've seen it when we talk about solid waste management. I'm going to show some results of eco-vecindarios, but I will mainly focus on Markets for Recycling, showing vision of change and how we work currently in the country. And finally, I will conclude with some lessons learned specifically regarding the application of the MSD approach. So when we see these pictures, this is probably familiar to you when you work in developing countries. You see if you don't have a proper waste management system, you have all these sites, contaminated sites with waste, which is of course a huge challenge. But as Swiss Contact, we see that there are also many opportunities when we talk of an integrated solid waste management system, or now working more and more in this circular economy approach, which is involving the population and local municipalities in creating new products and actually enterprises that would give value to these new products, and especially to involve the most vulnerable, which are mainly waste pickers and mainly actually female waste pickers that already work in this value chain. So our project Eco-Vecindarios, or eco-communities in English, worked for several years in Bolivia. I'm not going to show the results. You can see them here. But what I think is interesting is that we have been working very successfully in really trying to apply this integrated approach. And this meant that we were working both with awareness building of the population of different actors. We were supporting different municipalities in implementing differentiated collection system. We worked a lot in laws and regulations. For example, we were developing the first national law on solid waste for Bolivia, which then triggered a lot of actions afterwards. And then we had this intervention areas, which was a support to green businesses. And this is experiences that actually then showed us that that there was a huge potential still to further support these enterprises and creating a triple impact, as I will show later on. So because I will talk a lot about green businesses, I just wanted to give a very brief definition. Actually, ILO gives two definitions. It can a green business can either be defined through the production of green products or services, or through any process of any economic activity. So as project, we are mainly focusing on this first sector. So we say that green businesses are enterprises that offer products or environmental services. We're currently only working in the area of recycling, but actually any other environmental sector, you could also have green businesses there as well. And we've seen, as I mentioned, they're so important because they can really create this economic, environmental, and social impact we're looking for, and that they can really also offer solutions to often very complex environmental problems we have. So saying that, and after all the experiences of eco-vecindarios, we started to look on how we can really support more these green businesses. So when we started to do the market system analysis, you're probably familiar, if you know, of course, the MSD approach. This is a very helpful methodology to really get into very detail and get to know your system. So we've seen that actually waste can be seen, it's very similar as a community. So you also have a consumption and then you have a value chain. In this case, the characteristic is that you have twice the consumption at the beginning of course, of the first product, for example, a tire, but then you would also, of course, want this tire to be recycled. So we have a valorization, and then want the new products to be consumed again. So then this is how you can really close the circle. So after looking at all the support functions and the rules and regulations, we have seen that we have three main bottlenecks here in the country. We have a weak regulatory framework supporting green businesses. We have a deficient operational management system. This means that we didn't have any differentiated recollection systems or any separation at source of different waste types. But mainly we've seen that we had a deficient business development support for our target group, which, as I mentioned, are these green businesses. So this is how Markets for Recycling was kind of created. That was 2 years ago. And we have been since then working in these three intervention areas. So we're still working a lot on awareness building, communication, and also the generation of normative, which are kind of transversal issues. But now we are mainly focusing on this enterprise promotion of green businesses. So it's mainly targeting the private sector, compared to eco-vecindarios, which was more working with the public sector. And this is really how we can create green and also decent jobs. It's not only about creating new jobs, but also dignifying the existing jobs, for example, of waste pickers, while at the same time, we have this environmental impact, which we measure in tons of waste that is being reduced or recycled properly, and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So saying that, this is our vision of change. I just want to mention here that, of course, the MSD approach urges you to work systemically. So through our systemic intervention, this means that we work through different local organizations. We call them business support organizations. These are mainly chambers of industry, but also, for example, universities, municipalities, financial institutions, so that these actors, local actors, offer all products and services that are then actually needed by green businesses. It could be, for example, a green credit, or it could be access to research and technology, or to capacity building. And this is how green businesses improve both the quality and quantity of the products or services they're offering, they get more efficient, and finally, of course, they also access new markets. And this is how we get to the impact I already mentioned before. So one of the experiences we had, and that is also one aspect that the MSC approach helped a lot, was really to change to this systemic view and to really look at the whole system. Because initially, during eco-based scenarios, we directly supported green businesses. And the reason was that these green businesses were still very invisible, they were small, they were just emerging. But with the time, and because circular economy, the concept grew on attention in the public agenda, there were more green businesses coming up. So we started to work through chambers of industry, and we created in the 3 main chambers of industry of Bolivia platforms that were doing the interlinkage actually between the green businesses and the enterprise or industrial sector that we had in the country, so that the green businesses could actually access more markets. But then, and it's now actually in markets for recycling, that we are really looking at all the ecosystem of these enterprises, and we want to support or to see at all bottlenecks that they are currently having in different aspects. So that was one of the main differences of how we are working currently. So with this, I'm already with the lessons learned. I think the first issue I want to mention is that the MSC approach can really be perfectly applied into the recycling sector. As Isaac said, we probably don't have that many projects yet that look at this environmental approach, and most of them are also in the agriculture sector, but we've done these experiences that also in this recycling sector, and I'm sure also in our other environmental sectors, it works very well. We could, the approach really helped us to combine this environmental approach with this economic approach. And I think this is very important when you're looking at these win-win situations in projects we are implementing. Another advantage was that we could also select the sectors, let's so to say, that have most potential to create this triple impact. I forgot to mention that actually currently, because each waste type has its own logic, and there are many different waste types, of course, we decided to focus on 3 of them, which are tires, scrap metal, and batteries, because we see that in these 3 sectors, which is the waste from the transport sector, actually, we can create this economic, social, and environmental impact. And finally, what is, of course, very important is that we can, through the MSC approach, really, and through this very detailed analysis we do, really identify the most vulnerable in the green value chain, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, are many female waste pickers that are already part of the system. But when you design new systems or you are going to change them through the local actors, you, of course, need to see that they are also part of the system and that they're being included. Of course, we also face some challenges. I'm going to mention the 2 most important ones. First of all, we've seen that it is more difficult to work in such an emergent sector. As I mentioned, green businesses are not yet very visible in the country. We've done a national study showing that there are a little bit more than 250 green businesses in the country, which might seem a lot, but in the end, if you were trying to introduce new services and products for them, you of course need also a critical mass, and that would be, for example, the difference when you work with farmers, where you usually have a lot of them. And also that we see that it's more difficult to work in such a diverse sector of green businesses. We have formal, informal, large, big. Some are working in the recycling sector, some in others. So sometimes you also need some personalized solutions and not unique solutions for all of them. So I'm not going, because due to time issues, I'm not going to show the results. We have 2 years now working in this project, but just to mention very briefly that we have more than 20 green businesses we're supporting currently. We have many different actors from the public, private, and academic sector supporting actually the ecosystem and really trying to implement a circular economy approach in the country. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to hand over to my colleague Gramos.
Thank you. Thanks, Sara. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation. I'm Gramos Osmani. I'm Intervention Manager for Agribusiness at RisiAlbania project. RisiAlbania project is an innovative MSD project in Albania, supported by Swiss Development Corporation, SDC, in partnership with the Ministry of Finance and Economy, and is implemented in Albania from Helvetas and Partners Albania. The main objective of the project is to create jobs for youth in a socially inclusive and sustainable way. The vision is that the jobs will be created by supporting the growth of the main sectors like agribusiness, tourism, and ICT, which represent the demand from one side, and from the other side, the offer to have better access, the youth to have better access for job opportunities, labor market information, intermediation services, and have the right skills. Today, I have a pleasure to share some practical experience of working in one of the sectors, medicinal and aromatic plants. In short, we say MAPS. So since the beginning, the team at RisiAlbania discussed three main dimensions of why to select this sector. So the first important dimension was the economic part. Albania is an important player in the trade of MAPS. It's ranked in the position. And please allow me to share my screen because I started to discuss.
Yes, I was going to say, I know you have some great slides to show, Gramos, so it'd be nice to see them.
Sorry for that. And do you see my screen? Yes.
Yeah, we see it.
First, Albania is an important player, and Albania is proud that in some of important countries like United States have a good market share, like in sage, 65%. Also, they exported different types of MAPS, very related with labor-intensive work, and in the main markets like United States, Germany, and others. So MAPS represent a potential, an advantage for poor regions, remote regions, and a potential for incomes for farmers and exporters, and a potential for adding value and better margins for the sectors. The other important dimension is the social dimension. Many families in Albania are dependent from the incomes of MAPS, working in MAPS. But the main focus actually was the wild collection, which it's not an attractive job. It represents some risks. It's low labor productivity, low quality jobs, and which is the most important, it's not attractive for youth. The other dimension was the environment dimension that we are also concentrating. Albania, due to the climate conditions, have a rich biological diversity with many plants, but the problem is that over-exploitation on natural resources, too much focus on wild harvesting, which are in danger year by year, are decreasing, and this affects the diversity. And also the other aspect is that there are many losses due to the low poor practices in post-harvesting especially. And the challenge is how to improve this. Another aspect is that there is also not a very active role from the local government who can inform and control this part of the environment. So these were the main dimensions. In the end, all the dimensions that we put the sector in the risk and in discussion, the sustainability of the sector. So here, in a photo, we can see clearly how the vision was how to switch from wild harvesting, from the problems that we discussed, to more cultivation, where we can conserve the natural resources, when we can pay respect for the work of people. This was the main aspects of the discussion. Then we started to work with private business. The main actors that we consider that are important, that can pilot a change, are the exporters, who are in the core of the system. And it was challenged. It was challenged to find the right actors, the right partners, the partners who can bring, try to pilot new things, new models, And the old models was that the exporters did not have good contracts abroad, mainly due to the quality, mainly due to the low practices in post-harvesting. And from the other side, they were not giving clear incentives to the farmers to incentivize them to start the cultivation. The main constraints in this old model was that more than 50% of maps were classified as second quality, which means low incomes for farmers. The risks in the rural areas, people were not motivated to stay in these sectors. Incomes were not stable. What we did at RISI, we supported the first pioneers to try the new model, to try the model of achieving high value markets with contracts, with higher margins, but they needed to improve the quality by offering, by investing closer to the farmers, especially in drying systems closer to the farmers where the farmers can deliver fresh, and they increase the source of more towards the cultivation by offering clear incentives for the farmers, like agronomic advices, inputs, and drying service. As a result of this new model, our partners started to get the first results. They increased the incomes. They managed to sign new contracts. The farmers increased their incomes by more than 15% due to improving the quality and increasing the quantity on the cultivation. So the next step was delivering this experience to other actors, to other exporters. Here, I would like to bring to your attention also one important part was the technology. So switching from the poor drying practices into better drying systems, better practices for the maps, for the better quality was also an important key aspects of this change. And as I said, we concentrated also in disseminating information to many exporters, also to other donors about this practice. And we are happy that other donors in Albania have started to follow what we built it. Another important aspect that we were focused, not just working with private business, but considering also the important role that the local government can play. So establishing a better cooperation between public and private. Municipalities have an important role in Albania. They are involved in the economic development. They have in their duties to control and to manage the forests. And here we supported them in two directions. The first, we facilitated the establishment of cluster, a bottom-up approach, where the farmers, the exporters, University of Agriculture, and the municipalities and the extension service, they come together in the table and discussing and communicating. This was missing before. So we initiated and promoted this type of communication. And this brings some results in two municipalities. The municipalities started to offer incentives, financial incentives like in taxes. They started to offer public land that was available, and they clearly saw as an opportunity to create more jobs in the region. And the other aspects, we motivated the municipalities to play an important role in promoting, attracting the investments, open the doors for exporters, bringing in the regions for signing contract based on the standards. And we're happy that the municipalities started to change in the region. They started to switch from the wild harvest to more cultivation, and more than 40 farmers started the cultivation for the first time. More than 30 hectares of land were given by RAN. And also they played an important role. They started to train people for the good agricultural practices on wild collection. Some of the lessons learned that I like to share access to information alone was not enough to simulate the change. In the beginning, we started to bring information about technology, about other countries' experience, but was not enough to speed up the process of change. And the second important step that was working directly with private businesses. And here we got the lessons that it's more feasible when you work with lead firms, with exporters who are driving the value chain and who show that are committed and own the initiative. The other important thing is the communication from the beginning, communicating with stakeholders, communicating to the main players like exporters, bringing results to their eyes, why they need to invest, why they need to change, what is the future, to make them aware about the risks, but also to make them aware about opportunities and profits. Thank you. I hope I was clear. If you have any question, I will be more than happy. I have been lucky that I have been working with Clara. Clara was our team leader, and it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Gramos. So now I'm going to take over and try to wrap this all up into some overarching lessons. I did this research for the lab last year, which on how to integrate market systems development in the environment. And so to put this research into context a bit, the starting point of this research was the realization that while there's a lot of information and guidance on how you can use MSD to promote poverty reduction or to advance decent work, there was very little on where the environment fit there and how you could promote environmental outcomes. And sometimes there were even indications that MSD projects were achieving their objectives at the expense of the environment. And so this research was basically designed to answer these questions, to investigate why environmental considerations are often disregarded, and to identify how these could be successfully integrated. And so to answer these questions, we wanted to look at practical experiences of projects. So we really wanted to learn from practice and not have this abstract theory on what projects should do. And so we selected 5 projects, which you can see here in the table on the right. And all of these projects were value chain development or market systems development projects that were focused on achieving environmental, but also socioeconomic objectives. So there's really this kind of triple win dimension there. And these were all projects that operated in fairly different contexts. So they all operated in different sectors and in mostly different countries, which was really done on purpose because we wanted to try and unearth overarching lessons that were applicable across sectors and country contexts. And so we did manage to unearth various lessons from this research. And here I'll focus on those which I think are most important, staying quite broad, and which have also been illustrated by Markets for Recycling and RisiAlbania. And so what I found in my research, which also comes out quite strongly in these 2 cases, is that green sectors and green supporting markets are often very thin. So they're often very strong enabling environment constraints to improve environmental outcomes. There are a few suppliers. So in the case of EcoWest and Darius, there were few green businesses involved in recycling. The main waste collectors were informal waste pickers. There were a few support services that were geared towards the needs of green businesses. Weak awareness among waste generators, so consumers didn't know kind of how they could properly sort their waste. Businesses didn't know either, and there was also a weak policy framework surrounding this. And it was kind of the same for RisiAlbania. Kind of you had this situation of a tragedy of the commons, where you had this overexploitation of these natural resources, which resulted from this status quo mindset of businesses who didn't want to change or didn't know how to change. And you had also a weak policy framework surrounding this. The harvesters didn't have the skills to move into cultivation. They were informal. So you had all these kind of challenges surrounding these sectors. And so what are the implications of this? So I think one thing is that it's really important for these projects to do sector selection. And kind of it's really a key stage for environmentally focused projects. And here I think there are two major dimensions to consider. And the first is that it's key to select sectors based on opportunity and feasibility for green growth. And I think this is perfectly exemplified by RisiAlbania, which selected maps as a sector because it was this high value agricultural market. So it's not just like these regular onions or whatever vegetables it's this high value product, which also faced these obvious sustainability challenges, which were impacting the sector's economic viability. So there were obvious there were obvious win-wins that were just waiting to be seized, and it was in the interest of all economic stakeholders involved to pursue cultivation as a sustainable alternative to wild harvesting. And the second dimension in the sector selection stage is that you have to consider the fact that feasibility and opportunity are not kind of static. This can change over time. And so for example, in the case of Ecovesendarios in markets for recycling, in its first phase, as Sara mentioned, it really worked on kind of developing, working with the public sector and kind of setting up these municipal waste collection systems and treatment systems for basic solid waste, such as glass and paper. And it raised awareness among businesses and consumers on the importance of sorting this waste and properly disposing of it. But then, so in its subsequent phases, it was able to move to focusing on more complex value chains. So it worked on electronic waste and now transport sector waste. And it was able to do this because it leveraged these previous market system improvements. So if it had straight away worked on electronic waste, then maybe that would have been much more difficult because awareness wasn't there, the infrastructure wasn't there to do that. But then the thing is, like, even if you select these high potential sectors with high green growth potential, where there are these win-wins that exist, there are often many different constraints that are there and that you need to address. And so what you see is that environment-focused projects often have to work at these different levels, at these different levels of the system. So they have to work on kind of supporting functions directly with the businesses and on rural segments, which are often disregarded by traditional MSD projects, which don't really focus that much on the policy level. So Ecovesendarios, as Sara mentioned, they work with green businesses, support service providers, kind of to develop these public services with municipalities on regulations and norms. And also RisiAlbania kind of worked with exporters to develop this new business model, but then it also worked to support upgrading of skills of the harvesters and with municipalities on public services and public-private partnership development to support sector growth. And I think here there are two key things to point out. And one important one is that, as I said, these sectors are often thin. So in other words, the supply of green inputs and technologies is not sufficiently developed. So of organic inputs or greening, whatever other technologies you can think of, but also then access to end markets where consumers are willing to pay for sustainably produced products is weak. So basically the idea is there's not this market that exists that you can just plug into if you have the capacity. You really have to create and thicken this market to make it viable. And so you have to stimulate the supply, demand, and linkages in between to make sure that like-minded market actors are able to work together to develop this opportunity. And another important element is that these projects also often need to strengthen the business case. And that's also why working at the policy level is very important. And here, since this is often a really challenging area for projects, and few MSD projects work at the policy level, then what I saw, and what it's not all projects like this, but many, they often work with local authorities. So yeah, in these two examples with municipalities, and they do this to support these small changes in policy, but these changes can have a really significant impact, as they can be developed with close involvement with the local business community. So you can really find these kind of these small fixes that can have a big impact, since they're really adapted to the local context. So now to conclude, I think that there are a few lessons that are also relevant for project design and for projects or development practitioners that are hesitant to use MSD to achieve environmental objectives. And I think the first major lesson, which comes out quite strongly in the case of RisiAlbania, is that integrating environmental objectives in MSD projects can add significant value. So there are significant win-wins out there just waiting to be seized. And by working on these, you can not only help solve environmental issues, but you can also help achieve long-term livelihoods impact for the target group, which is really in line with MSD's core objectives of achieving sustainability of impact. And the second major lesson, which comes out more strongly in the case of markets for recycling, is that MSD adds value to the achievement of environmental objectives. So as I said before, MSD can help projects build these complementary intervention portfolios, which is really key to supporting nascent green markets. I mean, these markets are very small, so you have to work on these different levels. But then again, this is really conditional on an ability to understand the market, and so you have to conduct thorough market analysis, and you also have to experiment with different market actors to see where there's market appetite, where there's capacity, and so you have this intervention portfolio which has interventions that'll fail and others that'll succeed. And I think and another thing I think also is that MSD also helps environmental focused projects achieve their objectives, is that MSD also helps in leveraging economic incentives. So this is really key to promoting market-driven environmental sustainability. So the thing is, if your priorities are not the same as the businesses you're supporting, your message just won't come across. And so here it's really important to focus on these good enough solutions that can bring environmental benefits, but that are also economically attractive to businesses, so that kind of enhances the potential to spread. And I think there's another example of this in the paper, which is the case of ILA, which was working in the brick making sector in Latin America. And in its first phase, it was really focused on promoting these environmental technologies, these kiln upgrading technologies that offer these really high environmental benefits, but that weren't in line with business priorities. And so in its second phase, it adopted MSD, and this really enabled it to have this entrepreneurial mindset and really work in line with what local market capacity allowed. But yeah, of course, successful integration is not always easy. There are various kind of things that you have to have. You have to know whether what you're aiming for is feasible. You have to have staff which are on board with integrating these environmental objectives. I mean, this is not always the case in MSD projects. You might have some which are resistant and feel there aren't synergies, there are significant trade-offs. And you also have to know what are the challenges and solutions to environmental challenges. And I think to do this, to be able to also promote these solutions, it's really key for projects to understand environmental and especially economic benefits of what they're proposing, and to be able to promote this to skeptical businesses. And so in doing this, what you see is that many projects work on developing a business case. So they really quantify the economic benefits of environmental upgrading and document them so they can use this to engage with businesses. So it's, yeah, you have to leverage economic incentives, but you also have to know these kind of precisely what they are. Yeah, and this is something that RisiAlbania did in the case of MAP. So it has, I think Sara, Isabel shared this before, it has this business case which really quantifies the economic benefits for exporters of switching their business model. So yeah, thanks for your attention. And yeah, if you want to learn more about this research and the other work our team does on MSD for Decent Work, you can visit the link on the right. And now I'll hand over to Mike to, yeah.
Thank you, Isaac.
Thanks.
Yeah, I strongly recommend that that paper, the note, the guidance note. They're really, really informative and quite succinct and not too long. Really helpful and covers all these issues in great detail. So I'm going to give Clara the microphone for a moment. I also just want to say we are running, I thought it might happen, our speakers have been very rich in their presentations. We are running rather late. So I want to warn you that we're probably going to carry on the Q&A a bit beyond the top of the hour for another 10 or 15 minutes. So if you can stay for that, please do. I won't wrap up hard at the top of the hour. But if you've got any more questions in the meantime, please put them in the Q&A box. But Clara, you were going to give us a sort of a bit of reflections really from an outside perspective, or a slightly outside perspective. Now you no longer work for RisiAlbania.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I finished Risi a bit over a month ago, and I don't want to take too much time away from the questions that are there because they're very interesting. So I'll just jump right in it. So as I was listening to the presentations, I think it's very interesting to contrast the two MSD projects, such as the one that Sara presented that has explicit environmental targets, and RisiAlbania, which does not have explicit environmental targets in our log frame. But while Risi doesn't have environmental targets, the project still has introduced green interventions across its private sector development portfolio, and not only in agri, but also in tourism and ICT. And this wasn't done because of a sense of moral duty, but also out of a conviction that MSD programs are not only there to do no harm, but they're actually there to generate positive externalities and to generate benefits, and look at that triple bottom line that Sara was mentioning of economic, social, and environmental benefits. So the truth is, for practitioners out there, and I'm a practitioner, so I know how this feels like, you have your targets, maybe you don't have any environmental targets in your log frame, and you have to partner with the private sector, and the private sector is often very reluctant to introduce practices that are more sustainable because they require a higher upfront investment, because the return isn't clear, because they're not aware of the benefits that they may carry. But I see that as being a core part of what an MSD project can do. Our projects can de-risk those investments and help the private sector to shift towards practices that we know are generally going to be the trend that markets are going to go into. So in conclusion, this very brief intervention, sometimes it feels like there is a false dichotomy between development and meeting targets and environmental or sustainability considerations. And in a way, Isaac mentioned it as well. It's completely possible to have a portfolio that balances interventions that are maybe more traditional or conventional with interventions that are a little bit riskier, more greener, if we want to call them that, because that also helps to reduce that perceived risk that many partners have. So, and I second Mike on his recommendation to read the ILO guide, because I do think it's very practical and very useful for projects and want to do that. So thank you to all the speakers, because I think it was very, very insightful, and to the BIM for organizing this.
Well, thank you, Clara, and thank you for keeping it succinct as well. I want to get us into some of these big questions, but just before I do, there was a couple of kind of points of clarification, really, the questions for you, Gramos. I don't know if you could address them quickly. So there was a question from John Chettleborough about how the new drying technology was introduced. Was a subsidy involved? Did lead firms play a role? And there was also a question, slightly bigger question from Nora, about what you think really drove change. You know, what was it what was the real incentive for people to switch from wild cultivation, from wild collection to cultivation? Was it economic, or was it regulatory? That kind of question. So maybe if you could quickly address those two, and then we'll go to the big picture.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the questions. The approach was to facilitate this change in many directions. First was bringing the technology providers closer to the exporters, who are the lead firms, to show what are the potential. The second was exchange visit to countries where they sell with a double prices due to the good quality by using the technology and the model. And the first pioneers were supported by cost sharing to motivate them to take the risks, because the big change was to prove to the exporters that by investing closer to the farmers, not to your facility, can bring more results and can motivate more farmers to engage with you. Regarding and also disseminating the business case and not supporting the others, because in the system was not a problem of financing, was not a problem of money, it was a problem of model, proving the model that can pay off. So regarding the question from Nora, yes, the main motivation or what this model was why they motivated the farmers, the harvesters, to switch, is by offering income security, offering contracts and with embedded services. But the exporter in this time was closer, not being, let's say, with many intermediaries, but closer to the farmers by giving direct support and making them confident with the contracts and with the prices before the season. This was a main driver. Regarding the local government, we didn't enter to regulatory framework, but the cooperation with them, that they need to find this language with the business. They should understand the potential, and they should offer clear incentives to attract the exporters in their region to sign contract with farmers for the cultivation, to apply them in their model. Because in Albania, there is plenty of land, agricultural land, which is not cultivated for years, which is of great potential, especially in the rural areas where we don't have big heavy industry for organic cultivation, because it's are the right environment, the right conditions for organic farming.
Great.
So, yeah, in organic certification, the exporters are forced to get a license from the municipality, and municipality give license for wild collection.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for answering those questions. So let's just step back a bit and look at the bigger question. I mean, a couple of people, well, we recently published a blog by Raul Hakamul, who's here in the webinar, about trying to draw links between the market systems development approach and donut economics. And for those of you who've read the blog or know what donut economics refers to, it's a concept where we really try to take more seriously the environmental and limits to economic growth, and the planet, if you like, planetary limits to economic growth in various dimensions. So Sara, if you don't mind being brave, I want to kind of take this on head on, really. And there was in fact a very good question about this from Valerie Nelson. What are the limits to a kind of market orientated approach to economic development if we take the sort of environmental limits to growth seriously? And are there big trade-offs here between what we're trying to do in market systems development and, if you like, the planetary limits to environmental exploitation?
Yes, thank you, Mike. That's a very good question. And I think the biggest challenge is really to put theory into practice, right? Because when we talk about donor economy, about circular economy, it sounds all very, very nice in theory, because you say you want to produce more with less, but really putting that into practice is a real challenge. And as we've seen, I think also in the presentation, you need a lot of issues for that. You know, you need a normative level, you need awareness building, so you need people that are aware of responsible consumption, that are actually then also going to consume all these green products and services you're offering. And you need a lot of other things too, right? What I think the main challenge is really to identify all these business opportunities, right? So private sector has a very important role there. As Clara mentioned, I think that's very important to take into account, is that private sector usually is very reluctant to implement environmental policies, right? Because they see it as a cost. But in our experiences, and this now specifically in the recycling sector, but I think there are many other sectors, in transport, in energy, in buildings, for example, in agriculture, where you could say the same, that there are already green businesses that are there and trying to identify also the business opportunity, right? And I think this is the challenge, but at the same time the opportunity, right? So that we need to support all these kind of emerging sectors that is already there, sometimes very invisible. You know, we recently had COP26, and we have all governments there discussing about climate change, and well, you can discuss if that's useful or not. I think you need that as well. Of course, you need national and actually also global policies for all rules, regulations, sometimes even sanctions to develop a more environmentally friendly development. But at the same time, you already have a private sector who is already trying to offer all these green solutions there and already have it there actually, and we should support them. So it's not only about it's trying to make them more visible, as I said, and trying to help them grow so that they can really have a bigger impact, right? Because in the end, of course, there might be a lot of greenwashing as well. We know that from private enterprises, but I think that most businesses that are in this sector are serious about really not only trying to grow, but really grow sustainably and creating all these green jobs and income, as I mentioned.
Thank you. So just to nail it down, though, I mean, are there limits to what a market systems or a market-orientated type approach can achieve here, in terms of if you like, meeting meeting these global planetary needs? You know, we know we've got to change economies, you know, make them more circular, reduce consumption, increase and reduce production of greenhouse gases. I mean, are we seriously saying that market systems development can make a significant impact on those kind of global challenges?
I would say yes, because you're really trying to look at an integrated way, right? So really, and this is, I think, the biggest plus of this MSD approach, right? You really need to have a very, very deep knowledge of your value chain. And I think in our experiences, just only talking about recycling, we've seen that each waste type has its own logic. You need a specific technology, specific knowledge, specific capacities just for one waste type, right? So you need to have a very detailed view and a very specific view. You cannot have solutions for your whole system, and that would be the same, I guess, for also agriculture products. You cannot put just all products in the same pot. So yes, the approach really helps you to have this very open-minded look at the whole system. You have these models looking at the constraints and rules and regulations you have in the support function. So if you really do that analysis, which takes time, of course, we just to give you an idea, we had 6 months doing this very detailed analysis before actually starting the project. This is, I think, only then when you really can find the bottlenecks that you really need to change, and that you can change, of course, as a project, because some things we may not be able to change, and then it's up to governments, it's up to the population, it's up to the civil society to do the change. But if you look at it from your project perspective, you need to be clear where you can really have this positive impact.
No, thank you, Sara.
May
Clara,
I add to that?
Yes, just before you do, Clara, I just want to say, for those of you who have to leave now, because it is the top of the hour, thank you for joining us, and please do give us your feedback on the webinar. There's a link in the chat box to a sort of quick feedback survey, so please do let us know what you thought. We will share the recording later. If you can stay on, then great. Clara was going to add another point, aren't you, Clara?
I was just going to say that, just adding on what Sara mentioned, that the MSD approach is not rocket science at the end of the day. And what we're doing is we're thinking in systems. And we're trying, with a set of tools that we have that can always be improved, to understand not only one value chain, but to understand how it interacts with other dimensions. And through that, to find leverage points that can help us achieve desired results. So one issue may be that sometimes the targets that we're working towards are not necessarily going to help us on the road towards achieving environmental benefits. But that doesn't mean that the projects don't have any agency over that, because there's always decisions that can be taken to create more balanced portfolios. And a lot of the tools that we have available to us on the MSD toolbox, such as the fact that we follow adaptive management processes, allow us to fine-tune what we do along the way. So I wouldn't say MSD is a set of dogmatic approaches that will allow us or not allow us to meet environmental needs, but it has certain tools that can be used to make sure that development is done in a way that is not harmful to the environment and that is regenerative.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very helpful. I've got a question. There was a question right at the beginning, actually, from Brian Cohen, ACDI Voca, pointing out that a lot of what we've talked about is kind of on the production side. You know, we're looking at production constraints and opportunities and technologies and so on. He's asking about, what about the consumption side? Are there things we could be doing to, or are there examples of shaping consumer preferences to favor more environmentally sound goods and services that might be part of our portfolio, if you like? I don't know whether, Sara, you would like to, or well, I'll throw that open to all of you, actually, if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Maybe very quickly, I think that's of course also a very good question. And if you don't have the demand side, of course, it doesn't make sense to offer all these green products and services. So that's why I think, and as I've shown in the presentation, it's so important to work also on this awareness building and communication to your target actors in the end. So and there again, it's important to differentiate, because usually you would talk about, you know, the whole population suddenly consuming organic food or green or recycled products, for example. But as I mentioned before, if you say that each value chain is very specific, you also need to know who is going to consume in the end your product, right? So just to give an example for tires, because we're trying to look at what can be done with the used tires. You have a very specific product, for example, that you can do a specific material that is used for playgrounds, for example. So there, of course, you need to target municipalities, you need to target maybe the private sector, and not the whole population as it is, because they're not going to buy it, right? So it's again about having this very specific solutions for each project you want to have, and of course trying to support with marketing, with awareness building. And in the end, one of the lessons learned we have is that sometimes it's not the best idea when you talk about marketing to sell a green product, right? Because sometimes people are reluctant to say, okay, maybe a recycled product, it's not of a good quality, right? Or, you know, organic, you know, it's too expensive. So it's sometimes better to do it the other way around and just sell it as a high quality product, and maybe all the other benefits you might have. So that's our experience.
Thank you, Sara. And Isaac, you had something to say on this too, I think.
Yeah, and to bounce back on that a bit, the fact that, yeah, you can really promote these products as not only as green products, but as aspirational products, as these kind of premium products, which independently of their environmental benefits, consumers want to purchase. So there's this example of the Elan project, which was covered in the brief, which worked in the DRC to promote these home solar systems in the country. And so this is an expensive product, and people, weren't necessarily convinced of the energy benefits of it for them as households. But the project really supported marketing of this as an aspirational product, saying that kind of if you have this home solar system, then it's like having this luxury car for which kind of the whole community will see you with and envy you in a sense. So this marketing aspect is really important, and building that capacity for marketing within local market actors is also really important.
Thank you. John Chetelborough from Practical Action has pointed out that the cases we've discussed today are not about agriculture, and that wasn't necessarily a deliberate choice, but it was also part of kind of looking more generally at the breadth of market systems development as an approach. But what do you think? I mean, would any of you like to, have you got any experience of thinking about this approach in relation to making agriculture, well, I don't know what greener, i.e. either reducing local environmental impacts or making agriculture more resilient to climate change, for example?
Yes, I think that here, and Gramos also can jump in, but one thing, when I saw that comment on the chat box, we didn't mention that actually in our portfolio, in the RisiAlbania agribusiness portfolio, there are also interventions that deal with conventional agriculture. And that's what I was trying to say before. It's not because we're trying to do things that are a little bit greener that we don't still do the traditional stuff. But there's always ways to also push for higher standards, even in conventional. So very specifically about agriculture, it would be trying to push people to go for certifications that are going to minimize soil erosion or improve water management practices. And obviously that also bring into consideration social and labor standards. And that's what we've done. So we have a whole set of interventions in RISI that deal with introducing, for example, the global gap standard to the Albanian market. And that's done in a parallel track to working more on organic, that obviously is greener. And we need both to reach our targets and also to learn from the market and to generate a reputation that will allow us to do more in the future.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So look, we are, I think we really need to start thinking about wrapping this up because we're 10 minutes over. There was a question, Sara, from someone specifically about sort of recycling for composting in Bolivia. Maybe if you can address that very quickly, or maybe type an answer, that might be a way to do it. But it was looking at essentially at the problem of separating compostable waste from non-compostable waste, I guess. Did you see that question?
Yes, I've seen, and I think it's better if I write it in the chat directly, because it's maybe a very more specific question for a specific waste type. So I can do that. Okay, great. Okay, in that case, I think I'm gonna sort of regrettably sort of wrap things up. We can carry on chatting in the chat box. I would be really grateful if you could put your comments into the quick survey that Isabel will put a link in the chat box now, and we will carry on, having these conversations through the Beam Exchange website. I mean, in particular, I refer back to that blog by Raul that was published only a few days ago on the website, and there's a bit of conversation starting off around that blog. So if people would like to get in touch and share their thoughts or their reflections after this, that would be great. But otherwise, can I just say a really big thanks to the four of you for a really interesting webinar again. I know you put a lot of work into preparing this, and it's really paid off. So it's been a great pleasure hearing you all talk about this great topic. And I would just finally just say to everyone who's listening still, do look at that paper by Isaac, because I think he sums it all up really brilliantly. And it's very, as Clara said, it's a very practical paper.